Hello everyone, I'll be presenting the Intangible Studies of the Sembawang Shipyard. Here's the historical timeline and I'll be focusing on the naval base era. So from my historical research, one characteristic of the naval base that stood out to me was transient communities. Transient meaning temporary or impermanent. So across the decades, thousands of workers passed through this place in cycles. Malay workers on monthly contracts, Indians on 3-year contracts, Hong Kong technicians rotating between cities, and so communities were constantly rotating. The communities were continually being displaced. Hence, these communities were temporary communities. And this unstable social fabric shaped the lived experience of the naval base more than any physical infrastructure. And to understand this environment further, let's meet Ali. Ali is a Malay worker who is also an immigrant, and he represents many of the immigrant laborers here at the naval base. And when Ali first arrived here, he was feeling very unwelcome, disoriented, and very uncomfortable and detached from home. His daily rhythm is strictly controlled. There were sirens that indicated the start and end of shifts. There were dense dormitories, long hours, and a constant sense of being somewhere foreign and temporary. Although he adapts over time, the environment never fully allows him to feel settled because it wasn't designed for people like him to build a life. So, Ali's weekday is dominated by a monotonous, torturous routine. The entire naval base functions on a synchronized rhythm, a single pulse that dictates everyone's movements regardless of culture or background. So after work, Ali retreats to the Asian dorms. Here, people gravitate towards their own ethnic mini-communities, not out of hostility, but out of survival, because these clusters provide the only sense of familiarity in a landscape built for efficiency rather than comfort. Yet, even in these small pockets of belonging, Ali still feels the lack of true personal space and the absence of home. And this is Ali's initial psychogeography of the naval base. So the naval base was filled with many key spaces like the cinema, Jalan Kedai, the jetty, nearby kampongs, and more. But even with all these, the environment still felt controlled and rigid because these spaces served and prioritized the base first, and then the workers come second. So while all these spaces did support daily necessities, they rarely offered true social or emotional refuge. And because of this, workers like Ali and many like him began creating their own forms of comfort. They carved out cultural familiarity in whatever spaces they could find. And these weren't official amenities. They were community-driven acts and efforts of adaptation born from the need to survive a stressful and foreign environment. So we can see across several examples, we'll see how the workers forged belonging. So firstly, through building religious institutions such as the Naval Base Mosque, it helped anchor co-ethnic communities. Next, the communities also started doing more sports together, especially football at the Devport Road, because sports created shared joy across different cultures. They also built food spaces like Jalan Kedai, where they brought Kerala cuisine, Malay cuisine, Chinese cuisine, and all this becomes really comfortable social spaces for the temporary mini communities. And not only that, they also built cultural centers such as the Kerala Library, which preserved language, rituals, and identity. So all of these spaces were not luxuries. They were necessary survival mechanisms for people who were constantly displaced. And today, many of these spaces have been repurposed or erased, but their imprint remains in the memories of those who lived through them. So here is the final psychogeography after the community efforts. And you can see my section lines here, and through the sectional studies, we can clearly see the contrast between the naval base's hostile design and the community's efforts to soften it. So section AA highlights the dense, controlled infrastructure, the rigid and monotonous rhythm, and the hostility of it all. Then section BB reveals how workers practice something called parasitic architecture, where they attach informal cultural and social functions to rigid structures, that is the naval base. Section CC shows the present, and it shows how many of these cultural traces and efforts have been overwritten by newer developments or lost, and all this just dilutes the history and emotional history behind them. So from all this, we can find the spirit of the place. The Sembawang Naval Base was never defined by its efficiency or industrial power or rhythm, but Sembawang Naval Base's true identity lies in the invisible resilience of its transient communities, people who refuse to let hostile environments erase their cultures or their sense of self. So through spatial resistance, informal placemaking, and cultural anchoring, they created emotional warmth within an otherwise rigid and impersonal world. The genius loci of Sembawang Naval Base or Sembawang Shipyard is therefore not industrial heritage. Rather, it is the human survival, cultural persistence, and the quiet fight to build home in a place never meant for it. That is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.